Let's see, where do I have my agendas in front of me? And then with that line that I need, do I read? Let me go ahead and take roll call first. How's that?
Chair Kimbrough,
Here,
Vice Chair Stedfield,
this,
Member Bagwell. Here. Member Bonkowski. Member Erb. Member Hastings.
Here.
Member Macquarie. Ex officio
Here.
Member Rosenberg.
Here.
A quorum's present.
so the whole thing from the top down? The first paragraph. Okay, sorry, I'm just a matter of business here about public comment, so I'm going to read this into the record. Public comment limitations. Although CAMPO often provides an opportunity for additional public comment during each specific item designated for possible action on the agenda, public comment will be temporarily limited to the beginning of the agenda, before any action is taken, and again at the end before adjournment. This policy will remain effective during the period of the time the state of Nevada is under the state of emergency as declared by the governor due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and is intended to achieve the efficient conduct of meetings while facilitating public participation via video conference and telephonic means. Okay, that was for the record. So, got roll call and agenda management notice. Anything changes in the agenda?
No changes from staff.
All right, thank you. Disclosures, any disclosures for this meeting today, or this afternoon? Seeing shaking heads, I don't see anybody on the screen making any comment. All right, we move on, and this is a public comment period at the beginning of the meeting that I just explained. Is there anybody on the line for public comment?
Mr. Chair. However, Todd Reese is not in the meeting yet.
Oh, that's a good point to be
Do we
made.
need to? Yeah, can you give me a minute to try and get him connected?
Sure, thank you. So we'll be on hold here till we get legal involved with the process here.
Hello, this is Todd. I'm on the phone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Todd.
Okay, I'm on the phone. Go ahead.
All right, so we were at public comment. So the question was if there's anybody on the line for public comment.
There is no public comment, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. All right, then next on the agenda, I have approval of the minutes that are in the package for September 9th. Do I have any discussion or a possible approval?
I move to approve the minutes of CAMPO for September 9th, 2020 as presented.
Second.
Yeah, a motion is second. Call for the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Any opposed? Nope. All right, so those are passed, so move on to public meeting item 6A for possible action, discussion and possible action regarding a formal amendment to CAMPO's federal fiscal year 2018 through 2021 transportation improvement program to add one project.
Thank you, Chair. Eric Warren for the record. Staff is requesting approval for a formal amendment to add one project to CAMPO's federal fiscal year 2018 to 2021 Transportation Improvement Program, commonly called the TIP. A formal amendment is required when adding a new project or making a significant change to an existing project in cost or in scope. The amendment will add the Colorado Street Corridor project into CAMPO's TIP. It's going to program approximately $1.4 million in federal and local funding for the Colorado Street Corridor project, which is between Carson Street and Solomon Road. The funding makeup is around $741,000 in surface transportation block grant funding, and another $340,000 in community development block grant funding, and then about $357,000 in local V&T funding. The project will rehabilitate the road and incorporate complete street improvements in line with Carson City's ADA transition plan and the Carson City Safe Routes to School master plan. The incorporation of the project has been requested by the Carson City Public Works. A formal amendment requires a 14-day public comment period. No comments have been received. Staff, that concludes my comments, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of staff? Go ahead, Larry.
Just in general comment, I've had a lot of people that live on Colorado Street over the last few years quite concerned about the truck traffic and other issues on that. When we get to the design feature of this, will you be noticing or reaching out to those in that general vicinity so they can help comment on any of the structures that you're going to be doing on Colorado, just to get them involved and early on in the process instead of at the back end?
No, thank you. It's a great question, and we have begun the process. Carson City Public Works has begun the process. They are working with a consultant to develop a survey, as well as mailers to go out to the folks along Colorado Street as well as the neighborhood. And so those will be going out shortly. I don't have an exact date, but we are working on those actively. And so we'll keep the CAMPO board as well as RTC apprised of that as we move forward.
If I can get a copy when you send one out, it would be just wonderful, so I'm aware of
Yes, no, thank
the
you.
same information that they got in the mailer. Thank you.
We'll be sure to send that to the RTC as well as CAMPO.
So you guys did that on your own. It's not a requirement to do that. I assume somebody chose to do that as
Yeah,
part of the
correct.
process.
And that's part of Carson City Public Works, so kind of same folks, but different hat. But that's part of the process, is to inform the residents of the project, but also get their feedback as to what are the safety issues, what are the nuisances, what do they like right now, and just start bringing them into the process and bring them along with us so that we don't get to the finish line without them.
Good job. Thank you. Any other questions, staff? Seeing none, since there's no public, I call out for either an action or any discussion.
I move to approve the formal amendment as presented.
Second.
Second, Brad. Any other discussion? Seeing or hearing none, call for the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimous. Next item on the agenda is 6B, announcement and discussion regarding the release of CAMPO's draft 2050 Regional Transportation Plan for the Carson Metropolitan Planning Area.
Thank you, Chair. Dirk
Dirk.
Warren for the record. So CAMPO staff is happy to announce the release of the draft 2050 Regional Transportation Plan. Staff has been working on it together for a while, and so we're happy to get it off our desk for a little bit. But the official 30-day public comment period is open. The release of the draft was advertised in the Nevada Appeal as well as Record Courier in print form and in digital form. We've also notified our stakeholders, which includes the Regional Transportation Plan Working Group, as well as our regional, state, and federal partners. The public comment period is part of the document's refining process, and staff is happy to receive comments. The RTP is a federally required document. Generally speaking, it's required to have a 20-year horizon. It's required to identify existing and projected demand on the transportation system. And the way that the plan does that is through use of the travel demand model. The model examined three scenarios, one being a baseline of 2020, a mid plan of 2030, and then kind of the final year of 2050. Additionally required is a system-level cost analysis. So included in the Regional Transportation Plan, or the RTP for short, the plan includes a conservative, high-level 30-year cost analysis to what it would cost to maintain roads, sidewalks, paths, and street signages. And this incorporates Carson City, the northern part of Douglas County, the western part of Lyon County, as well as NDOT's facilities within CAMPO. The analysis then compares the 30-year cost to what we can reasonably expect from revenue. And the analysis did clearly show that there is a funding gap, which is probably not a surprise. Another requirement for the RTP is to incorporate performance-based planning. These are relatively new initiatives from past and recent transportation bills. So we've incorporated the performance measures as well as the targets into the Regional Transportation Plan. So in 2018, which was the first year that the CAMPO board set targets, we finally got final data for 2018, and we've incorporated that into the plan. When we look at our safety targets, which are kind of the ones that is the one that CAMPO adopts every February, and those include the number of fatalities, the number of serious injuries, and so forth. We met 4 out of our 5 targets, so the targets that we did meet, and we reduced the number of serious injuries, we reduced the number of non-motorized serious injuries and fatalities, and then we also reduced the rate of serious injuries as well as fatalities. We were close, but we didn't meet our target for the number of fatalities. And again, that number is based on a 5-year rolling average. Lastly, the plan is required to have a list of fiscally constrained and regionally significant strategies and actions to support the development of an integrated multimodal transportation system. So the list of projects is included as well as a map at the end of the regional transportation plan. The proposed strategies are within the available revenue, and there is additional revenue that's not used that would allow CAMPO to incorporate and amend the regional transportation plan to add projects as we move forward. I did provide the most recent copy of the regional transportation plan to all the board members. This is available online as well. So that concludes my comments, and that's just a high level of the regional transportation plan, and staff is happy to hear any comments on the plan.
Any questions of staff? After all that work? Well done. I mean, that's a huge document. I'm surprised you didn't have a 2050 party or something at the end of that. This is like huge. Isn't this the biggest document you're required?
This is one of the larger documents. Is typically updated every 5 years. We do plan on bringing the final back to CAMPO in December. So there'll be time, there'll be comments between then and as well as at that meeting. So.
Also,
That's when you celebrate.
Who said that? Oh, Sandra, what'd you say? I'm sorry.
I just said that's when you celebrate.
Yeah, there we go. Well, I told Dirk before the meeting that...
This is Chaz.
Go ahead, Chaz.
I just had a question of Dirk. I got the online link, but it wasn't in my packet. It probably works when I picked it up. Is it waiting there now, Kirk? It would just save me printing it out.
Yeah, the document, there is a document at Public Works for you. It is also online, but yeah, if you need another copy or if you want us to send one to your house, we can do that as well.
No, I'll come and pick it up. Thanks.
Any other questions, comments?
Mr. Chair, if I may, we've done regional transportation plans in the past, and we've always been in compliance with federal regulations and requirements for the regional transportation plan. But under Dirk's leadership for this effort, we really stepped up our game, if you will. We held a number of online webinars that were widely participated. We had stakeholders that had never participated before. I think at one point we had something like 36 participants on the call with Dirk and Kelly and others on the team responding to comments and getting a lot of really good input. I know Chaz participated in at least one of those calls that I recall. NDOT staff, Federal Highways were there. We also had an in-person open house here at the community center that we navigated despite COVID, had some participation there, though limited, and we really upped our multimodal game. So we've been able to incorporate the Safe Routes to School master plan, our long-range transit plan. We're looking at incorporating ITS and some of that intelligent transportation systems. In the future, we've established that framework, and so just big kudos to Dirk for leading that effort. It's not evident in this small, stapled packet how many hours were spent on this. So just wanted to give him the credit he deserves on that.
Sure.
I really hope that the public digests it and reads it and comments, but that they also use it to understand the challenges that we face. Because I am often asked, why can't you just, wave your wand type thing and take care of this, or make why can't you just make this work and roads are your priority? It's like you need to understand the issue first. So I really think the document does a superb job of laying out the foundations for the public to understand the issue. So well done. And again, I hope the public takes the time to really read what you have and then let us know if there's something in the plan that you think we're taking a wrong direction on, because I don't think people, they think we make the decision and that's a 6-month decision. And it's like, no, it's a 5-year, 10-year, it's a long-term plan that we're executing. So I really encourage everyone to read this. And again, thank you for a good job well done.
Supervisor, those are fantastic comments, and I will highlight, and Dirk, there's a lot in here, and I know not everyone has had a chance to read it, but in this 30-year project list, there is not a single local road reconstruction in Carson City for 30 years. And so it's, that's not even something that's easy to say out loud. It's really hard to digest and understand, but to your comment, I know you received those comments, so the project list is really important.
That's those little nuggets that were hidden inside of the document that were really important. I also told Dirk before the meeting, I think that this should guarantee his employment to 2050 since he wrote the document. So I don't know who has authority there, but we'll work on that. All right, so let's go to, possible action. What is the action? Was that, oh, there it is. Okay, I'm looking at the 6C. Okay, that was 6B. We're going to 6C now. There we go. Let's try that. For possible action, discussion of possible action regarding the federal fiscal year 2021 transit asset management performance targets. Lucia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to dork out on transit targets right now, and so if I start getting confusing, please interrupt me and ask a question. The Federal Transit Administration, FTA, has transit asset management, these TAM performance requirements. We have an adopted TAM plan for Jump Around Carson that was adopted in October of 2018. And every year we're required to establish performance targets for our transit assets. Jack has 3 types of revenue vehicles in the rolling stock asset class. We have bus, cutaway, and minivan. 8 vehicles are buses, 6 are cutaways, and we have 1 minivan. Our equipment asset is our Ford Explorer SUV, and we have 2 facilities assets, a portion of the fleet maintenance facility and our Jack administrative facility. FTA defines a default useful life benchmark for each rolling stock asset class. The default useful life benchmarks represent the expected life cycle for each of our assets, specifically for the purposes of FTA's TAM final rule. And I call this out because for purposes of establishing TAM targets, we look at years a vehicle has been in service as compared with FTA's default useful life benchmarks. The first table in Exhibit 1, it contains our assets, the default useful life benchmarks for those assets, the number of assets in each class, and then the number of assets exceeding the default useful life benchmark, as well as the proposed targets. Same as the methodology we've used in prior years, the proposed targets for federal fiscal year 2021 are equal to current conditions. We are expected to meet or exceed the proposed targets. And as a reminder, there's no fiscal implications associated with meeting, not meeting, or exceeding these targets. We're only required to establish them annually. If you recall, the adopted performance targets for last year, federal fiscal year 20, were 20% in the rolling stock category and 100% for equipment, 0 for the rest. This year, staff proposed 13% for rolling stock and 100% for equipment. As we continue to implement our capital improvement program, we continue to maintain and improve our fleet's state of good repair. Now, Exhibit 2 is what I'm going to talk about for the rest of this presentation, and it's a very small text, but I trust we all are ready to digest this all. And these are details from the 2020 Asset Condition Assessment. I'd like to draw your attention to the 12th column in Exhibit 2, FTA Default ULB. This is the default useful life benchmark for each asset. So this is, again, what FTA wants us to look at, specifically for purposes of the TAM plan and the TAM targets. Next to it, there's a exceeds ULB question mark column with a yes or no flag. So these are the assets that have exceeded FTA's default useful life benchmarks. You'll see the minivan, the cutaway, and the SUV all are flagged yes. And these are the 3 vehicles that we're talking about tonight with the requested action for the proposed targets. Now, if you look to the right, there are subsequent 2 columns called minimum useful life in years and FTA minimum useful life in miles. These are different thresholds that FTA uses as minimum useful life of rolling stock assets as it relates to disposal of the assets. So we're not talking about TAM anymore, we're talking about disposal. And they're different, but they're related. And when you compare the values of the FTA default ULB with the minimum useful life in years, you can see that the second set of thresholds is much lower than the default useful life benchmarks for TAM. You'll also notice that there's an additional threshold, so not just years in service, but also miles in service. So when we're talking about disposal of assets, it's the first threshold that you hit that you've then met the FTA minimum useful life. Further right, there's a column, min useful life, ? And this indicates whether or not that the asset has exceeded FTA's minimum useful life for purposes of disposal of the vehicle. Any vehicle marked with a yes could be disposed of today without owing FTA any money. The ones with a no have not met FTA's minimum useful life. And if we disposed of it today, we would owe FTA some amount of money. And there's an equation that they use related to miles and years where it depreciates. I don't believe these 2 thresholds have been presented to you together before, but I hope it's helpful to better understand how they relate, specifically in the context of our long-range planning for transit for CAMPO and the financial obligations associated with Jack's assets. And so it's a combination of the FTA default useful life benchmark and the FTA minimum useful life that helps us get to the final investment ranking, which is at the right of the table. And that helps us develop our capital improvement program. And that translates into, at the far right, the anticipated fiscal year for replacement. So vehicles 4230 and 4234 are being replaced with the vehicles that we purchased last year in fiscal year 20. Those were delayed by the manufacturer due to challenges with COVID-19, but we anticipate receiving them by Thanksgiving. We received a $3.7 million CARES Act grant to help Jack Transit respond to COVID-19. And within that, we were approved to purchase 4 vehicles this year. Those replacements will come when we order them for the minivan, for 4237, 4238, and 4239. Additionally, Carson City's fiscal year 2021 capital improvement program that was approved will have 2 vehicles that replace 4236 and 4240 this year. As you know, as vehicles get older, their maintenance costs increase, and we experience challenges with finding parts when things break down. So as part of the approved TAM plan, staff conduct this condition assessment annually, and the plan is considered a living document that's used to inform funding decisions using latest available data. With that bigger picture in mind, I will circle back and remind you that the action tonight, staff recommend approval of the proposed TAM targets as they relate to those default useful life benchmarks. But I wanted to provide this bigger picture to help you understand, and I'm happy to answer any clarifying questions. Thank you.
A lot of information. Any questions for staff?
Lucia, could you repeat the numbers, the vehicle numbers of the vehicles that are planned to be replaced this year?
Yes, sir. So those are in the table in Exhibit 2. If you look at that last, I believe it's the last column.
I see where they are. You just went too fast and I couldn't keep up.
No, you're good.
2021?
So 4230 and 4234, those vehicles were ordered as part of the approved fiscal year 20 CIP. So those will be gone, this winter. We're hoping to get the new vehicles, any day. The minivan of, I believe it's 4005, 4237, 4238, and 4239. Those were approved as part of the CARES grant to be ordered this year. And then Carson City's fiscal year 21 capital improvement program approved replacing 4236 and 4240.
Thank you. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 8 of the top 9.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Wow. So did COVID bail us out of a need? Unbelievable surprise, I guess, huh?
Right, and I'll remind you that the CARES grants, those are 100% federal share.
Yeah. Isn't that funny how the funding comes to you in different ways? From COVID, who would have thought of that? So you're in good shape for the report for this year and next year.
You know, we are, and the CARES Act grant was really helpful. I think it's also a testament to the Board of Supervisors and kind of that dedicated, every year we've been doing 2 vehicles to stay on top of it. And that helps keep our maintenance costs low. We do run, and I should mention this, we run a very lean transit fleet. There are general standards for what they call spare ratios, so extra vehicles that sit in the lot just in case. We are under standard. We don't have enough vehicles. And when we break down, we're shuffling vehicles and trying to make it work. So we do run really tight, but we are efficient, as efficient as we can be.
Any other questions? Oh, did Lori have another? Go ahead, Lori.
So that kind of brings me a little bit to my question. So when I'm looking at this table, and if I were to look at vehicle 4236, and that one, the city is replacing this year. When I look at that, I see that we have it's 9 years old, right? And it's hard to see, 162,298 miles. When I look at the minimum useful life, it was 7 as a minimum, but we have not reached the 200,000 miles for disposal. Will we be keeping this as a spare vehicle to meet breakdown needs?
We anticipate, so these, that's a great question. These odometer readings we're taking at the end of the fiscal year. We anticipate meeting the benchmarks needed by the time the vehicle arrives. So,
Because of the length of time it takes to get the
right, so
vehicle?
Rich Hardcastle is putting together the quotes and everything to place the fiscal year 21 order. By the time he orders it, it's 10 to 12 or 14 months until we actually receive the vehicle. And at that time, we'll be in shape to replace it.
Well, I'm just saying, maybe based on the number of years, that does not play out when if the vehicle's driven an equal amount per year. I'm just suggesting, do we have an opportunity to not literally dispose of it? You would take it out of the day-to-day fleet, but it would remain as your backup. In case you have a breakdown or something's in for service, then you can bring these in. That's just a question to meet part of our need.
That's an excellent suggestion and something we'll look at.
Any other questions?
I have a follow-up to Lori's questions. What criteria do you normally use to determine which disposable assets are retained? And what do you do with the ones that are disposed? Are those auctioned off, or are they salvage, or?
Great questions again. So when it's determined that they are taken out of revenue service, they are put on the list. The city takes rolling stock assets to auction twice a year. There's a fall and a spring auction. So they get kind of put on that list that Fleet Services manages. And those auction proceeds would go back to transit at the end after that's done. The different things that we look at with regard to asset disposal have to do with miles and years, but also certain vehicles perform worse. There were 2 international buses that from the beginning were lemons. At one point, they were out of service up to 33% of the time they were in the shop. And that is the 36 and the 40 that we're trying to get rid of. As soon as, the minute we can get rid of them, that's what we want to do. So we're looking at those types of things to reduce costs and staff time overall at Fleet.
Any other questions? Who takes care of the monitoring the fleet management and all of those elements that you're just talking about there?
Again, great question. So the facilities assets, Ron Reed is the facilities supervisor, and he did a fantastic, he led that facilities assessment. Over on fleet side, Rich Hardcastle supervises that. And our mechanics, they do an annual inspection. It's, a 3-page, they check everything from seals on the windows to tire pressure to rubber on the floor. So they do a really good job and take a long time to do that.
All right, thank you. Well, any other questions before we bring this back for a motion? No more questions? Can somebody make a motion on this?
I move to approve the federal fiscal year 2021 transit asset management performance targets as presented.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Brad. Call for the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Nope, carries unanimous. We'll go on the last item on the action agenda for possible action, discussion and possible action regarding submission of a grant application for the Federal Transit Administration's Public Transportation COVID-19 Research Demonstration Grant Program for development and deployment of a contactless payment system for Jump Around Carson. And Lucia again.
I'm going to give this to Alex Cruz, our transit coordinator.
There we go.
You can be
Okay.
tough on him. He's ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Like Alicia said, I'm Alex Cruz. I'm the transit coordinator. So on October 5th, the Federal Transit Administration's Public Transportation COVID-19 Research Demonstration Grant Program released a notice of funding opportunity for the development and deployment of innovative solutions that support the reopening of local economies through access to safe public transportation. This funding opportunity will provide $10 million of program funds at an availability rate of 100% federal share, with additional consideration to applicants who propose a local share. These funds are distinct from the formula funds that are apportioned to CAMPO. Staff is recommending the submittal of a grant application with a 20% local match. The current estimated project cost is $350,000, with $70,000 of that being local match. The local match is proposed to be funded from the existing fiscal year 2021 transit fund budget. The application would be requesting funding for the development and deployment of a contactless payment system for Jump Around Carson. The adopted Transit Development and Coordinated Human Services Plan identified a need for the modernization of JAC's fare handling capabilities. A contactless payment system would help JAC mitigate the risk of transmission of COVID-19 through reducing the interaction between riders and drivers, along with reducing the exchange of fares. The system would also increase fare payment options to include credit and debit card payments and add the ability to purchase fares at any time of the day. While a contactless payment system will have some upfront and some recurring costs, it should serve to increase the efficiency of the JAC service overall. The application closing date is November 2nd, 2020 at 11:59 p.m. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of staff? Lori?
So in general, is the reason that we have $70,000 available for match to actually apply, even though this grant doesn't require a match, you want to use it as a competitive purpose? So is that because we were able to get the CARES Act money to buy the buses, and so we freed up general fund transfer money is available? And the second choice is, how did we determine that we were going to do a 20%? That's his hard question. Oh, it is hard. Why are we doing 20% instead of, let's say, a 10%? How did we magically pick the match number to be 20% instead of, let's say, 10?
I think the 20% local match was chosen because it would help us be a lot more competitive. With the CARES Act being 100% fully funded, it just meant that our match funds in our general fund available were pretty high, so we were able to kind of raise that number a bit higher just to make ourselves more competitive. With $10 million, it's going to be a lot of money, but there's a lot of people competing, so we want to make sure that we're high up on that list.
I will add, Supervisor, that if we used this type of investment, we could use our general apportionment. It's considered a capital purchase, and so it would be eligible generally for an 80-20 match if we used our other funding. Yes, it is because we're primarily operating using that CARES Act grant this year, not just for the vehicles, but for operations as well. But certainly with direction from this board, that's a sliding scale. We haven't submitted anything yet. And the project budget's approximate at this point. So we're requesting some flexibility as we refine the project estimate this month. We don't expect it'll go up or down at all. And of course, if we're awarded, it'll come back for approval. But because the call just came out on the 5th, we're acting quickly.
I guess I just hesitate that the 80-20 is the standard. And I get concerned when we're doing a project that has technology involved, because I don't want to say I haven't seen those go well. But overall, I always see a creep effect with technology projects. They tend not to, they don't come off without a hitch. And so the question that I had is, should we do a 10% reserve? Because we're still going to have to carry through if we can't finish it. And do we need to save some of that general fund for if the project doesn't meet all the high marks?
No, right on point. And we have every indication from the U.S. Department of Transportation and the administration that their intent with this program is to give it to more rural areas. We don't know, right, if we need a match or not. They just say that, in the call that there'll be more, deference to agencies that propose a match. But we have no indication that a 10 versus a 20 would make us more competitive. That's just what staff threw out there as the suggestion.
What did you want? Okay, we're still in discussion point of the 10% discussion there. Any other questions?
I do. Alex, could you give us a description of the hands-free fare purchase system?
Currently, at this time, we haven't identified a specific system. The grant opportunity kind of gives us the ability to develop a system specifically for Jump Around Carson. Part of what the grant is looking for is innovative methods to do that. So what we were going to do is kind of take a look at our specific demographics and figure out what would best work for us. So we haven't decided whether it's going to be specifically a card type payment or online or any of that kind of stuff. We were going to look at all the different options available before choosing on one specific one.
Right, but as you mentioned, there are certain classes of systems that exist that we would be looking at. Can you describe those so that the public and everybody here understands which type of systems are available, how do they work, and how are they benefiting us?
There are a few different systems available. There are some that use a token. You might pay beforehand, put it into a machine, give it a token, and then you drop the token into the system. There are the cards, that preloaded cards. You put $20 of fare onto a card, walk up to the machine, and just kind of scan it, similar to the contactless, like Apple Pay type systems. I'm sure there are others available that I'm not quite familiar with yet. And then we're probably one of the only ones that are still doing just 100% full fare, which we would probably stick to a fare as well. So it'd be a combination for us.
So are you aware if there are cell phone-based fare programs where you just scan your cell phone and it automatically debits the fare?
Yeah, there are some of those as well, an app-based. So it would be essentially through a cloud system, and we would download an app. Again, it would tailor it to Jump Around Carson. So those are available as well. And those are an option that we're not going to ignore.
So if the idea is to reduce the interactions between the passengers and the drivers, are there going to be modifications that are going to be needed to the buses in order to segregate the driver from the passengers? And if so, have you looked at the potential cost of that?
Jump Around Carson is currently looking at, because of the COVID-19 situation, we're already kind of looking at driver barriers for the buses to separate out those systems. We're already doing the rear entry as well. So those contactless systems could kind of integrate with that, where we can have a reader in the back of the buses, on the buses that have the rear entry. And we would just kind of keep working forward with that. We probably would not add a separate one specifically for these contactless payment systems, a different barrier, but we are already working towards having those separations in place, aside from the contactless payment, just because COVID-19 is a pretty big deal. And so we're trying to find the solution that works for Jump Around Carson as far as those barriers go.
Thank you. If you get time, there's some really, really interesting, really cool Israeli systems that are out there for smart buses. Automatic braking systems if a pedestrian or car is in the way, all kinds of stuff.
Definitely take a look at that. Thank you.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Chaz.
Yeah, Sydney, Australia, for example, has a contactless system that you can use either with a card, prepaid card, or your phone. You can just download, a little bankroll on your phone, and it'll recognize both. So, as you mentioned, Brad and Alex, also there's a plethora of different systems out there. I would be a little concerned if we went with cell phone only, that some of our older users of the bus system might not have a smartphone that would enable that. But a system that would take both a card and a smartphone would sort of address that issue. And well, several other places too that I've been that use similar systems. So I think this is a great idea. And I would, I guess when it comes to the match, we're sort of shooting in the dark, because it's better to get the grant money if we do a 20% match than not get it if we propose a 10% match. But we don't know that, so that's just pretty much a judgment call, really. We're guessing, I guess, but I think this is a great idea and would certainly enhance the system.
Go ahead, Lori.
So I also want to know, do you anticipate ongoing costs that we have never had in our budget before, so that we're aware of really what we're doing too? And that could happen during the acceptance, because we'd have more detail of what plan. Well, no, the acceptance of the grant still wouldn't tell me which project we're implementing, because you're going to go out to a design for that. But what do you anticipate as additional expense to the fund to be able to have? Because again, I haven't seen any technology project come off without a hitch and not cost more money than intended and have ongoing budget impact, that we have to now have a $5,000 a year maintenance contract or whatever. So what are you seeing for the future impact of this decision?
And before you answer that, the other issue that we've had is that we get proposals for technology systems, and it's not a complete package. In other words, it's a component of a complete system, but yet we're being presented this component, and we're not told that this is only maybe 60% of the cost in the system. So I think what Lori and I are trying to get at is that what we really want to see is the complete soup to nuts package. What is the cost beginning to end? What are the details? What's it going to do? How's it going to do it? So that we have an idea of the ongoing cost, as well as the complete picture of the acquisition and implementation costs.
And so staff did look at previously trying to get the estimates together. There was an estimated $7,000 yearly cost. So staff looked at ways to kind of offset those yearly maintenance costs, like cloud memory and all that kind of stuff. So some of the things that we were looking at were fare increases. Jack hasn't really had a significant fare increase in a pretty long period of time. So that would be something to consider, would be a fare increase to align ourselves a little bit closer with other transit services. The contactless payment system would also kind of decrease the need for things like purchasing fare media. We purchase senior bus passes every year. We purchase the 10 ride passes and the transfer slips. So if we went contactless, we would need a lot less of that kind of those purchases. There would also be a little bit reduced labor between the treasurer and the Jack staff when it comes to reconciling those cash fares. So there is a bit of offset in those methods that we're kind of looking at.
So are you saying that instead of purchasing the senior bus passes, we would have the ability within the app to designate a free senior pass, and when they get scanned, it wouldn't cost them anything.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
Of course, unless they were using a card system that you're loading, then you'll have the expense of the card and the methodology to distribute the cards. But hopefully, they just get distributed a card when they sign up, and then you can just load it, because they can go and have an account or whatever, and they'll put the money on with their credit card or whatever. But I don't really have an issue with the 20% if I look in my mind and say the standard is 80-20. So I'm just looking, again, I don't think there's a magical answer. I just want to make sure we're also not giving away money, because they're offering this as 100, and maybe that's what gives me a little bit of pause, is they're offering it as 100% federal program. But you're telling me you had a conference call, and on the call, they said that that would maybe give you more points if you had a match? So maybe you're privy to more information than.
The NOFO does indicate that deference will be given to those that to propose a match in the written, and they did mention on the call. I can tell you they mentioned on the call with FTA earlier this week that there were 500 individuals on the call. Now, Alex and I represented 2 on the call, but who knows how many will apply. That said, this is an item in our long-range plan. If we wanted to propose, if it was the direction of the board to not propose any match, maybe we'll get it. You know, we are very competitive. We're very efficient. We do great at what we have. We have a huge senior population that rides, and they love our service. And I think we can sell it. We have great staff, and we could put together a great package. If we didn't get it, you know, it's disappointing, but, you know, we may not get it anyway. So, you know, in any case, you know, I'd love approval to put in a grant application, but staff are by no means going to, you know, be disappointed if we don't put in a match.
So, Lucia, I think one of the things that Lori's trying to get to here is that you could increase, like, I don't know where the 350,000 came up, because I believe I heard Alex say that you don't really have any hard numbers yet. So if you increased the amount of the request, then, and reduce the amount of the match, I mean, you could play with those numbers and come up with the same net, basically.
We could certainly do that.
All right, well, I have a few questions, Alex. Is this 350,000, does this pay for the equipment? Does it pay your staff time? Are you going to get a consultant to help? Kind of what were the expenditures for the 350 that you?
The 350,000 was from previous staff looking into the different available options for contactless payments. So looking at other contactless companies and their cost for startup, essentially.
So it's your staff time, essentially?
No, it would be their actual like startup costs.
Oh.
Like for creating the system and getting it working for Jack.
So who's they?
This was looked at through a couple different companies that were that provide contactless payment.
Okay, so it is like a consulting fee and okay. And will it allow you to buy the equipment that's necessary when you're, so that's the equipment too that's going to go in the bus to facilitate this whole program?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So that explains kind of where the money goes. And then a fiscal note, I guess, gets really important anymore for anything coming up in the budgets for the next year. So there's been a lot of discussion on this percentage. Is there any more discussion on the percentage that anybody might want to bring up?
Well, I do have a follow-up question on the equipment that goes into the bus. I was going to ask this earlier. The equipment that gets installed in the bus, is that transferable? So when we retire that bus, can that equipment be removed and put in a new bus? And if so, does that trigger any new licensing requirements? So is the license per a specific vehicle, or is the license to CAMPO, or how does that work?
Previous staff research indicated it was a number of licenses. So, as long as we maintain the same fleet size, they were transferable across vehicles.
And logistically and physically, the equipment can be pulled out and transferred into a new bus?
That was our understanding, and staff's intent is that we would put that in any sort of RFP we put out. One, it would need to integrate with our existing Jump Around Carson app, the real-time Where's My Bus. It would need to be able to integrate so that the payment and the money can make it to the treasurer's office. So we've been working in preliminary discussions with the IT department to make sure that they're on board and they're supportive. And then it would need to integrate across the multiple platforms. I will also mention that we have a tremendous amount of challenge with our fare distribution at the multiple venues. So right now you can go and buy tickets at the library, you can buy them at the senior center, and it's very challenging for those staff to navigate our different passes. We have different color passes, different years of passes, and the intent is that this platform would be something that they could maybe have on a Jack Purchase iPad or on their own computer where they can log in and do electronic fares. That would reduce kind of fraud across the different fare types, the challenges and the staff time there as well. So just wanted to add that.
Any other discussions? We're at a crossroads here on percentage, unless there's some more discussion to change the motion a little bit. Or I can just entertain a motion, get it on the floor, and then discussion.
I'll do that. I'm okay with, I move to approve submission of the grant application as presented.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I'll second that.
Want to give that one to Chaz?
Sure.
Okay, Chaz, you got the second. All right, so now I have a motion on the floor. Is there any more discussion on the percentage? If not, I'll call for a question here.
I think just on discussion, because again, you're going to be submitting the application. If we are successful in receiving the grant, if we can have a little more detail of what we're going to do before we move for acceptance of the grant. So I'm comfortable letting you apply, but I'm going to need a little more before I accept, if that makes sense.
Well, that would be
So let's go
natural.
ahead and get an application in and not thwart our opportunity to get the money, but anyway, thank you.
And I would add to that what I'm hearing, and so correct me if I did not understand correctly, we don't know what the cost of the system is. We don't know what the complete implementation costs are. So we're just asking for some free money, and we don't really have any facts or data to back up why we picked that amount or the match percentage or anything else. We're just trying to kind of hobble together a package and get some money that could help us out. My concern, and the reason I bring this up is I don't want to get in a situation to where we go in with a $350,000 grant ask, of which we're only going to get $280,000 of that, and then find out that we need $400,000 or $500,000, because if you come back to us at the board level and ask for that kind of money, the answer is probably going to be no. So I would just caution you, as you go through this grant application, make sure you understand what you're asking for and why you're asking for it, and make sure that you're covering all your bases so that this doesn't come back to bite us later.
Heard. We will do that, and I apologize that we don't have more information for this meeting. We will have more information for the final proposal that goes in on November 2nd. And I can just add that any overage above and beyond this grant would be covered by our normal FTA grant. So it wouldn't, I don't anticipate a situation that it would ever come back to the board. It'd be something that we would budget at least 80% covered with other FTA grants that are available now for whatever that's worth.
Maybe just on discussion, though, it's not the point of whether you'd have the money in the next budget. It's whether it is cost prohibited and we should not fund it. So I guess that's maybe what we're overall trying to drive the point here is I don't have enough data points to make a good decision. Do I think we should be moving in the direction of online accounts and purchasing via card system or phones? Absolutely. But if the project turns out $700,000 for what we do, then I would have to say no. It's cost prohibitive to the gain. And that's all. I look always for the rate of return and what we're doing, so.
So
Thank
this,
you there.
this is the same as the SAFER grant for the firefighters that we just had, where the first time the grant application came in front of us, we turned it down. We declined to submit because we didn't have all the data. And maybe about 6 weeks later after that, then the item was brought back to us with additional data, and they changed the parameters of the grant so that it was 100% funding and we didn't need to do the match. And at that point, we approved submittal of the grant, and then we actually got the grant. So that's kind of the process that we go through. You know, we really need to know what we're being asked to do up front. Otherwise, you put us in a position, and this is not a criticism, but you put us in a position of we apply for the grant, we get the grant, and then when it comes back to us to accept the award, we turn it down.
Well, I was actually going to make a comment to the fact that to turn in this grant, you have to figure out what you're going to do, and you're going to know all these things before it goes in. The breakdown of costs are going to have to be pretty specific to get the grant, so they're actually going to know a lot, but the problem is the timing, as it's due in November, so we won't have a chance to see the app. But I guess we can always ask to see the app before it goes out, not that we can make a ruling on it, but we can at least review it, feel comfortable with the process and what you have actually put in. I don't know if there's another way.
Well, it comes back for acceptance of the grant too.
Yeah, for the acceptance, right, that's true, so we can make action then if
Right.
if we weren't happy, but at least we'd see the document before it went out, and then we'd be, and I understand that there was timing about this, when money's available, and that you weren't able to put it all together, but you got to have it all together by November, or whatever it is, the 9th, or whatever you said, I guess.
Yeah, we have until November 2nd at
Second.
midnight.
Yeah, that's even sooner than that. So it doesn't necessarily have to be part of the action of this, but then I guess it wouldn't hurt for us to get a CC when you send it out, just to make us familiar with it. Is there any other discussion on that before we call for the question? Nobody on the screen? Nope.
Staff appreciate the additional direction and explanation, and we'll bring back additional information next time.
All right, well, I'm going to call for the question then. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, carries unanimous. All right, so that was finished with 6D. So now we're at the board comments. So I'll start with the screen. And Chaz, you've been center stage for us, so you don't know that, but you've been the main guy here. You can start with any comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is not really a CAMPO item, it's more of an RTC item, but since we're not having an RTC meeting, I thought I would just bring it up. I played scofflaw a couple of days ago and rode the new bike path from the linear ditch trail to Colorado Street along the freeway, as quite a few other people were doing. Anyway, and I just wanted to give kudos to the staff to see that finally almost complete. So good job, Stella.
All right.
That's
John?
it.
John, any comments?
No, I don't have any. Thank you.
All right. How about Bob?
No, thank you, sir.
Looks like Sandra's gone. Is any other, there's nobody else that needs to, and Todd's on there and doesn't, unless Todd wants to say something that we know you're still there. Nope. All right, so I'll bring it back here and start with Brad at the table.
I would just mention, since Chaz brought up multimodal transportation, that the new multi-use path that goes from the 5th Street roundabout down to the south end or to Silver Saddle Ranch is now open, and there's a ribbon cutting on October 30th at 10 a.m. So if you show up at the 5th Street roundabout trailhead, then you can attend that ribbon cutting, and it's a great trail. It's very wide, it's a very nice trail, and it'll eventually extend all the way around the south end of Prison Hill, come back up to Coon Street, and eventually all the way back up the west side of Prison Hill and back to the trailhead at 5th Street.
Carson City's way ahead in trails and communities, I can tell you. So, anything else? How about Greg? Anything to say, Greg? Nope. Lori, anything to say?
I'm just going to add to what Brad said. I happen to serve on the Parks and Rec Commission, so want to let you know we just put in a grant, and hopefully, seems like we're talking about a lot of grants today, but hopefully we get our round 3 of the SNPLA phase to do the next one on that very project.
Oh, cool.
So it would be phenomenal and I think it was $1.8 million for this one, and then we asked for another $1.8 million for the next phase. So let's hope.
I have no comments, so we'll move to the next meeting is scheduled 4:30 Wednesday, November 18th in the theater where we're at. And then this is the last chance for public comment. Do I have any public on the phone?
There is no public comment, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So then I call for a motion for adjournment, please. So moved, Lori. So done. Thank you, everybody.